Hello friends, welcome back to my channel, Knowledge Compiled. Friends, this is my second last presentation of Chinese military strategy, part 19. Friends, do make your notes if you want to make it from the video. Pause it, play it as many times as you can. Friends, the more you will go through the video, the more you will be able to learn it. Friends, try to memorize the facts, share with your friends, and please hit the like button and subscribe it. Let's move for the today's topic, that is about the paradoxical tactics employed by PLA during Third Indochina War. Friends, the People Liberation Army persisted with outdated mass assault tactics during the conflict with Vietnam despite proven inefficiency, contrasting with the adaptive approach of the People Army of Vietnam. PLA reluctance to modernize led to battlefield tragedies, while People Army of Vietnam flexibility ensured greater success. So friends, let's start with today's first topic, that is paradoxical tactics employed by the PLA during the Third Indochina War. Friends, the first is about the key challenges in the military tactics. Friends, in the context of Sino-Vietnamese War, the key challenges in the tactics can be understood as addressing the challenge faced by military planners in motivating soldiers to advance despite the inherent dangers of combat. During the Sino-Vietnamese War, which occurred in 1979, both the Chinese and the Vietnamese armies had to contend with motivating their troops to leave their safe position and advance into enemy territory. Friends, for the Chinese People Liberation Army, motivating soldiers to advance into Vietnam presented a significant challenge due to the rugged terrain, harsh weather condition, and the determined resistance put up by the Vietnamese forces. Chinese military planners likely aim to inspire specific behaviors in their soldiers, such as courage, discipline, and sense of duty, to overcome these challenges and achieve their strategic objectives. Friends, similarly, the Vietnamese People Army also faced the challenge of motivating their troops to defend their territory against the Chinese invasion. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Vietnamese forces demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination in the face of the Chinese offensive. Vietnamese military planners likely focus on instilling a strong sense of patriotism, solidarity, and determination among their soldiers to counter the Chinese advance and protect their homeland. Friends, overall it highlights that the universal challenge in military tactics are motivating soldiers to leave their safe position and advance in the face of danger. A challenge that was undoubtedly present during the Sino-Vietnamese War. Next, about the 1979 PLA approach. Friends, in 1979, PLA approach described the approach taken by the People Liberation Army of China in 1979. The PLA employed a strategy that combined intense political motivation and massed attack tactics during this conflict. The reference to intense political motivation suggests that the Chinese military utilized ideological indoctrination and propaganda to inspire their soldiers to advance into Vietnam. And this likely involved rallying the troops around nationalist or communist principles, emphasizing the importance of the mission and portraying the enemy as a threat to China's interest or ideology. Friends, additionally, the mention of massed attack in point number 3 indicate that the PLA relied on concentrated assaults involving large numbers of infantry advancing closely together. This approach aimed to overwhelm the enemy's defense through sheer force of numbers and firepower. The comparison to the density of rice in a paddy field suggests that the Chinese infantry moved in tightly packed formation, possibly to maximize their combat effectiveness and minimize casualties. Moving next. Next is about the mass tactics in late 1970. Friends, the use of mass tactics on the battlefield in the late 1970s suggests that such tactics may appear unconventional and outdated given their association with earlier conflicts, particularly with World War I. Friends, during World War I, mass tactics involving large number of troops advancing in close formation across open ground were indeed prevalent. However, these tactics proved costly and inefficient due to the devastating firepower of modern weapons such as machine guns and artillery, which inflicted heavy casualties on exposed infantry. Friends, by 1917, the shortcomings of mass tactics had become apparent, particularly with the failure of front assault against well-entrenched defenders. The widespread casualties suffered by attacking forces led the military strategists to reassess their approach to warfare, leading to the development of more flexible and decentralized tactics aimed at minimizing exposure to the enemy fire. Given in the historical context, the paragraph suggests that the continued use of mass tactics in late 1970s might be viewed as outdated and effective. By this time, military doctrine had evolved to prioritize mobility, firepower, maneuverability over static mass assault. Therefore, the mention of mass tactics in late 1970s implies a departure from contemporary military thinking and strategy. Friends, in the context of Sino-Vietnamese War, if the People Liberation Army of China indeed employed mass tactics as described earlier, it could indicate a divergence from the prevailing military doctrine and a reliance on traditional methods that may have been less effective against a more mobile and entrenched enemy like the Vietnamese forces. Next, about the comparison with World War I tactics. Friends, a comparison between tactics used by the People Liberation Army during the late 1970s, particularly in the Sino-Vietnamese War, and the tactics employed during World War I, specifically by the Germans. During the World War I, the German military, like other belligerent forces, often employed massed frontal attack characterized by the use of light machine guns and flamethrowers. And these attacks involve large number of troops advancing directly toward enemy position, often across open ground. The aim was to overwhelm the enemy through sheer forces of numbers and firepower, despite the significant casualties suffered in the process. Friends, it highlights the massed frontal attack fell out of favor due to their ineffectiveness. A lesson learned through the harsh reality of trench warfare and devastating casualties incurred by the attacking forces by the end of World War I. Military strategists had recognized the limitation of such tactics, especially against well-trained defender armed with modern weapons. Friends, the PLA adoption of similar masked frontal attack in 1970s as seen in the Sino-Vietnamese War may appear surprising and outdated. And given the lesson learned from the World War I and subsequent conflicts, such tactics were generally considered ineffective and inefficient by contemporary military standards. Moving next. Next we'll discuss about the PLA commitment to political motivation. Friends, the emphasis placed by the People Liberation Army on political motivation as a driving force behind their military tactics, particularly during the Third Indo-China War, also known as Sino-Vietnamese War. By prioritizing political motivation, the PLA sought to compel their soldiers to advance directly toward the enemy, regardless of the risk involved. And this approach suggests that the PLA relied heavily on ideological indoctrination and propaganda to instill a sense of duty, sacrifice, and commitment among their troops, rather than solely relying on the advantage of firepower. The PLA strategy centered on motivating soldiers to engage in direct confrontations with the enemy. Friends, there is a mention of a human wave attack in point 4 where soldiers advance en masse. It further highlights that the PLA commitment to this approach. Despite potentially having a firepower advantage over their adversaries, the PLA opted for tactics that emphasized overwhelming numerical superiority and sheer force of numbers. Friends, this strategy, reminiscent of earlier massed frontal assault, aimed to flood the enemy defenses with a continuous stream of infantry, potentially overwhelming them through sheer persistence and determination. Moving next. Next we'll talk about some human wave attack and firepower. Friends, human wave attack are a military tactic where a large number of infantry troops advance in closely packed formation toward enemy position, often with little regard for individual safety. Friends, the goal is to overwhelm the enemy through sheer numerical superiority and the relentless pressure of continuous waves of attackers. However, human wave attacks are costly and frequently fail to achieve their intended tactical objectives. This is because such assaults expose the attacking troops to concentrated enemy firepower, resulting in heavy casualties. Friends, additionally, the lack of coordination and maneuverability inherent in human wave attack can make them vulnerable to counter-attack or defensive measures employed by the enemy. And despite their potential drawbacks, human wave attack have been used historically in various conflicts, particularly when military commanders prioritize numerical superiority and brute force over more sophisticated tactics. However, as warfare has evolved and modernized, such tactics have generally fallen out of favor due to their high casualty rates and limited effectiveness against well-prepared and equipped opponents. Moving next. Next we'll friends discuss about some military strength, historical background, tactic and leadership structure. That is in Chinese PLA and Vietnamese PAVN during Third Indo-China War. In this, the first point we'll discuss about some comparison between Chinese and Vietnamese infantry strength. Friends, as per the book of Edward O'Dowd, The Chinese PLA infantry units were considered stronger than the Vietnamese counterpart. And this strength was attributed to several factors, such as more manpower. Friends, the PLA had a larger number of troops compared to the PAVN, and this numerical advantage likely contributed to the PLA's ability to conduct massed assault and sustain prolonged engagement on the battlefield. Next, about the abundance of assault rifle and greater number of machine guns and other weapons. Friends, the PLA possessed a greater quantity and variety of weapons and equipments, including assault rifles, machine guns, and other firearms. And this technological superiority would have given the PLA a significant advantage in terms of firepower and combat effectiveness. Friends, the comparison suggests in the terms of infantry strength, the Chinese PLA enjoyed an advantage over the Vietnamese PAVN during the Third Indochina War. And this advantage in manpower and weaponry likely influenced the military dynamics and outcomes of engagement between the two forces during the conflict. Next, we'll discuss about some historical background of Chinese and Vietnamese. First is about the initial similarity. Friends, both PLA and PAVN started with similar characteristics, including the use of outdated weapons and a lack of technical advantage. This suggests that during their early stages, both armies relied on simple and readily available equipments, typically of many revolutionary movements in developing countries. Both armies recruited soldiers primarily from the rural population, and the recruitment pattern is typical for agrarian societies where rural areas provide a large pool of potential conscript or volunteers. However, recruiting from rural areas also presents challenges such as dealing with poorly educated recruits and ensuring effective training. Both the PLA and PAVN face the challenges also. They face the challenges of training soldiers with limited education. Friends, training poorly educated soldiers require special attention to ensure that they acquire the necessary skill and discipline for military service. And this challenge is particularly significant in agrarian societies where access to education may be limited. Friends, both armies utilize a political work system to motivate soldiers, and this system emphasizes the importance of political will, unit solidarity, and patriotism among their troops. And by integrating political indoctrination with military training, both the PLA and PAVN aimed to instill a sense of ideological commitment and loyalty among their ranks. Next we'll discuss about some mass tactics versus open tactics. Friends, first we'll discuss about the mass tactics. Friends, mass tactics resembling a human wave involve coordinating large number of soldiers to advance together towards enemy position. And these attacks are often motivated by political indoctrination, emphasizing collective action and ideological commitment. Mass tactics aim to overwhelm the enemy through sheer force of numbers and persistence, and this approach often prioritizes unity and cohesion among troops, but may also expose them to concentrated enemy fire resulting in heavy casualties. Next, about the open tactics. Friends, open tactics on the other hand emphasize individual initiatives and flexibility on the battlefield. Soldiers are encouraged to exercise their own judgment and take independent action based on the evolving situation. And this approach allows for greater adaptability and responsiveness to changing condition but also require a high level of training and discipline among troops. Friends, open tactics are experimented within the late 19th and early 20th century as military thinkers sought alternative to the rigid formation of mass tactics. However, they faced challenges such as soldiers lying down during attacks which could disrupt coordination and cohesion among units. Next, reason for using the mass tactics. Friends, massed attack was seen as the most viable option for the armies composed of poorly armed and trained conscript. In such cases, soldiers may lack sophisticated weaponry, tactical training, and individual combat skill. Mass tactics provided a simple and straightforward approach that could be easily executed by a large number of troops, regardless of their level of training or equipment. Next, about the effectiveness. Friends, massed attacks were effective due to the shock they create upon impact with enemy. When a large number of troops simultaneously assault a defensive position, the suddenness and intensity of the attack could overwhelm the defender, causing confusion, panic, and disorganization. And this shock effect could disrupt enemy formations, weaken their morale, and create opportunities for the attacking force to exploit. Next, friends, we'll discuss about some political indoctrination and leadership in PLA and PAVN. First, about the role of political officers. Friends, political officers played a crucial role in both the PLA and PAVN by providing political indoctrination to troops. This indoctrination aimed to instill ideological commitment, loyalty to the cause, and a sense of purpose among soldiers. Friends, political officers were responsible for disseminating party ideology, ensuring adherence to the political directives, and promoting unity and cohesion within the ranks. Next, both armies emphasized the importance of willpower and enthusiasm over firepower and professional training. And this ideological emphasis reflects the belief that motivation, determination, and morale are essential factors in military success, sometimes outweighing technical proficiency or material resources. Friends, by prioritizing will and enthusiasm, the PLA and PAVN sought to cultivate a fighting spirit among their troops that could compensate for any tactical or technological deficiencies. Next, about the leadership structure. Friends, PLA employed a layered leadership structure that include both tactical and political leaders. These structures were designed to maintain discipline and motivation among troops while ensuring adherence to party ideology and directives. Friends, tactical leaders focused on military operation and combat readiness, while political leaders were responsible for ideological education, morale building, and maintaining political loyalty within the ranks. The combination of tactical and the political leadership helped to integrate military objectives with political goal, fostering unity and cohesion within the PLA. Next, we'll discuss about some PLA leadership challenges. Friends, the PLA leadership structure had a limitation in that tactical leadership only extended down to a squad level. This means that while there were leaders overseeing larger units such as companies or battalions, the leadership at the lower level, particularly at the squad level and below, might have been insufficiently developed or lacked the necessary authority to make tactical decisions independently. And this limitation could hinder the ability of smaller units to react effectively to changing battlefield conditions and adapt their tactics accordingly. Another issue was that the political officers, rather than military commanders, were often responsible for selecting leaders based on political criteria rather than military skill. And this suggests that loyalty to the Communist Party and adherence to its ideology were prioritized over tactical competence and combat experience when appointing leaders within the PLA. As a result, individuals chosen for leadership roles might have lacked the necessary military expertise or experience to effectively lead troops in combat situations. Friends, these leadership challenges, characterized by a lack of lower level tactical leadership and an emphasis on political criteria for leadership selection, contributed to the PLA reliance on massed assault. Massed assault involved large number of troops advancing together, as we have discussed earlier, and may have been favored as they required less reliance on decentralized decision making and individual initiatives, which could compensate for limitations in tactical leadership and the selection of leaders based on political criteria. Next, about the outcome of leadership choice. First is about the high casualty. Friends, the emphasis on mass assault coupled with limitation in tactical leadership and the selection of leaders based on political criteria rather than military skills likely contributed to high casualties among PLA troops. Friends, massed assault characterized by large-scale frontal attack tend to expose soldiers to concentrated enemy fire, resulting in significant casualties. Additionally, the lack of effective tactical leadership may have led to poor decision making on the battlefield, further increasing the risk to PLA troops. Next, about the low effectiveness in the military operation. Friends, it implies that these leadership choices were led to low effectiveness in the military operation. Massed assaults, while they may overwhelm the enemy through sheer force of numbers, are often costly and inefficient in achieving strategic objectives. And without effective leadership and tactical coordination, such tactics may fail to exploit enemy weakness or capitalize on opportunities for success. Friends, additionally, the focus on political criteria rather than military skill in leadership selection may have resulted in leaders who were ill equipped to devise and execute effective military strategies. Moving next. Next, we'll discuss about some evolution of the military tactics. A transition from mass human assault to more modern, coordinated and professional approach, influenced by experience in war and external advisors. Let's start. First is about the Chinese and Vietnamese experience in Korea. Friends, during the Korean War, the PLA employed human wave assault, which involved sending large number of infantry troops in closely packed formation toward enemy position. And these assaults aimed to overwhelm the enemy through sheer numerical superiority and persistence. Friends, well-trained US Marine units faced these human wave assault and effectively resisted them. The marine training, discipline, and combat experience allowed them to withstand the overwhelming numbers of PLA troops and maintain their defensive positions. And last point about the overtime, US Army units also improved their ability to withstand human wave assault through adjustment in tactics, training, and equipment. US Army forces enhanced their defensive capability and adapted to the challenges posed by the PLA massed attack. Next, about the change in tactics, Korean War experience. First point is about the adoption of new tactics. Friends, as a result of the experience and challenges result encountered during the Korean War, new tactics were adopted by the PLA. And these tactics represented a departure from the traditional massed assault and sought to capitalize on lessons learned from the battlefield. Next, about the Mao Zedong contribution. Friends, Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party and chairman of the Central Military Commission, played a significant role in formulating these new tactics. Mao's approach involved the use of small group of soldiers who could lay down strong firepower while taking advantage of cover to approach enemy position. And this tactic emphasized mobility, firepower, and the exploitation of terrain to achieve tactical advantage. And by 1953, the PLA had abandoned mass tactical assault altogether. Instead, they embraced the principle of maneuver warfare, emphasizing agility, surprise, and exploitation of enemy weaknesses. This shift marked a recognition within the PLA leadership that mass assault were no longer effective in modern warfare and that new tactics were needed to adapt to evolving battlefield conditions. Moving next. Next point is about sharing experience with PAVN. Friends, following their involvement in the Korean War, the PLA shared their military experience, tactics, and strategies with the PAVN. And this exchange of knowledge aimed to assist the PAVN in their own military efforts, potentially drawing upon the lessons learned from the PLA's experience during the Korean War. Next, about the early PAVN training followed the mass tactics. Friends, initially the training of PAVN mass tactics similar to those employed by the PLA during the Korean War. And mass tactics, we already discussed that it involves the large scale of frontal assaults, were traditionally employed by the communist forces but often resulted in high casualties due to the concentrated enemy firepower and encountered. Next, about the shift in the strategy due to high casualties from mass tactics. Friends, the high cost in the casualty incurred by the PAVN likely led to a shift in strategy over time. Recognizing the limitation and drawbacks of mass tactics, the PAVN may have transitioned toward more flexible and less costly approaches to warfare. And this shift in strategy could have been influenced by the experience shared by the PLA as well as the evolving nature of warfare and the need to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. Next point about PAVN experience in the Dien Bien Phu. Friends, initially used human wave attack against the French. Friends, Initially, during the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the PAVN employed human wave attack against the French position, which resulted in the significant casualties. Friends, despite their initial use, human wave attack resulted in the significant casualties for the PAVN. The concentrated firepower of the French defenders inflicted heavy losses on the advancing PAVN troops, highlighting the limitations and risks associated with massed frontal assaults. And third point about the losses prompted a shift to a smaller scale attack and attrition. Friends, the losses suffered by the PAVN prompted a strategic shift in their approach to the battle. Recognizing the high cost of human wave attacks, the PAVN transitioned toward smaller scale attacks and attrition tactics. And these tactics involved more calculated and measured engagement aimed at wearing down the enemy over time through a combination of ambushes, raids, and gradual attrition of their forces. Next we'll discuss about some impact of the political work on tactics. Friends, political officers within both the PLA and PAVN placed a greater emphasis on political indoctrination than on tactical training. And this suggests that ideological commitment and loyalty to the party principles were considered more important than developing tactical skills and combat proficiency among troops. As a result of this emphasis on political indoctrination over tactical training, both PLA and PAVN may have relied heavily on mass attack as a primary military tactic. However, mass attacks were deemed inefficient and costly, lacking effective small unit tactics. This suggests that while massed assault may have been favored due to their simplicity and alignment with ideological principles, they ultimately proved ineffective on the battlefield, resulting in high casualty and limited success in achieving strategic objectives. Moving next we'll discuss about the Soviet influence on tactics. Friends, Soviet military advisors played a significant role in influencing a shift toward modern infantry tactics within communist armies. This suggests that the Soviet Union, as a major communist power, exerted considerable influence over the military strategies and doctrines adopted by allied or aligned nations. The Soviets advocated for the adoption of smaller scale, coordinated assaults as part of modern infantry tactics. And this approach emphasizes the use of smaller, more agile units to execute well-coordinated attack on enemy position. And by employing smaller unit sizes, infantry forces can achieve greater flexibility, maneuverability, and tactical effectiveness on the battlefield. Friends, the Soviets promoted the use of night attack as a tactical method. Friends, night attack offers several advantages, including surprise, reduced visibility for the enemy, and the ability to exploit cover and concealment effectively. And incorporating night operation into infantry tactics enhances the operational capability of military forces and increase their overall combat effectiveness. Next we'll discuss about the PLA leadership changes and return to the mass tactics. Friends, following leadership challenges within the PLA, particularly under Lin Biao, there was a shift back toward mass tactics. And this suggests that new leadership priorities and strategic objectives influence the PLA approach to military operations, favoring a return to tactics characterized by a large scale engagement and massed assault. Friends, Lin Biao tactics favored large troop numbers. Friends, Lin Biao strategies favor the deployment of large number of troops, potentially reflecting a preference of overwhelming numerical superiority to achieve the military objectives. Next, about the limited initiative for junior leaders. Friends, Lin Biao leadership, there may have been a centralization of command and control with limited autonomy granted to the junior leaders. And this centralized approach could have been conducive to coordinating massed assault and ensuring adherence to the strategic directives from higher command. Next, about the frontal assault. Friends, Lin Biao tactics favored the frontal assault, which involved direct attack against enemy position from the front. Frontal assaults are a hallmark of mass tactics aiming to overwhelm the enemy through sheer force of numbers and firepower. And last, Lin Biao tactics favored deep column. Friends, Lin Biao tactics may have involved the organization of the troops into deep column, suggesting a concentration of forces in a narrow frontage. Deep columns are conducive to conducting massed assault and penetrating deep into the enemy territory. Next, about the PLA becoming the Maoist. Friends, Lin Biao leadership led to a shift in the focus within the PLA toward Maoist ideology. And this suggests that political indoctrination and adherence to Mao Zedong revolutionary principles become central to the PLA ethos and organization culture. Emphasizing Maoist ideology over professional military training reflect a broader commitment to aligning the PLA objective with Mao Zedong revolutionary vision. Next, about the reduction in the military school. Friends, as part of this shift, there was a reduction in the number of military schools within the PLA. Military schools traditionally play a crucial role in providing professional military training to officers and soldiers, equipping them with the necessary skill and knowledge for combat. And the reduction in the military school suggests a de-emphasis on formal military education and training under Lin Biao leadership. Emphasis on ideology and resulted in a less trained and effective military. Friends, the reduction in the military schools and emphasis on ideology likely resulted in a less trained and effective military overall. Friends, without adequate professional military training, PLA personnel may have been ill prepared to execute complex military operation and adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions, and this could have compromised the PLA combat readiness and effectiveness in achieving strategic objectives. Next point about the PAVN professionalism and Soviet influence. First is about the professional approach. Friends, unlike the PLA, the PAVN adopted a more professional approach to the military affairs, particularly under the influence of Soviet doctrine. And this suggests that the PAVN placed a greater emphasis on technical proficiency, operational competence, and professional training within its rank. Friends, the PAVN began its military modernization effort in the late 1950s, indicating a commitment to enhancing its capabilities and effectiveness as a fighting force. This modernization process likely involved the acquisition of advanced weaponry, equipment, and tactics, as well as improvement in organizational structure and operational planning. Friends, a key aspect of PAVN modernization effort was a focus on technical capabilities and professional training. This suggests that PAVN sought to enhance its combat readiness and effectiveness by investing in the development of specialized skill, knowledge, and expertise among its personnel. Next, about the shift in the PAVN approach, that is in the Second Indochina War. Friends, by the time of the Second Indochina War, the PAVN had largely abandoned the use of human wave assault. Friends, as we have already aware that human wave assault involved sending a large number of troops in closely packed formation toward enemy position. Next, attack become phased, emphasizing speed, surprise, coordinated movement of small units. Friends, instead of relying on human wave assault, the PAVN adopted a more phased approach to their attack. Friends, phased attack involve carefully planned and coordinated movement, emphasizing speed, surprise, and the synchronized actions of small units. And this approach allowed the PAVN to exploit weaknesses in the enemy defenses, achieve tactical objectives, and minimize casualties by avoiding frontal assault and engaging in more flexible and adaptive tactics. Next, next point about the balance of political work and military training in PAVN. Friends, while the PAVN acknowledged the significance of political work in maintaining ideological unity and morale among its troops, military training took precedence. And this suggests that while political indoctrination remained an integral part of PAVN organizational culture, it did not overshadow the importance of developing military skills and capabilities among its personnel. The prioritization of military training implies that the PAVN leadership recognized the paramount importance of professional competence in enhancing the effectiveness of its armed forces. And by ensuring that its soldiers and officers were well trained and proficient in their respective roles, the PAVN aimed to enhance its combat readiness and operational performance on the battlefield. And last point, as a professional competence as a key factor, friends, professional competence emerged as a key factor in determining the effectiveness of PAVN. This suggests that the ability of PAVN personnel to demonstrate proficiency in military tactics, strategy, and operational planning played a crucial role in determining the outcome of military engagements and achieving strategic objectives. Next, about the PAVN shift in the leadership approach. First point about the abolished dual political and military command in 1979. Friends, the decision to abolish the dual political and the military command suggests a restructuring of the leadership hierarchy within the PAVN. Previously, the PAVN operated under a system where both political and the military functions were often integrated within the same command structure. And this meant that political officers wielded significant influence over military decisions and operations. Friends, the abolishment of the dual political and military command implies a separation of political and military roles within the PAVN leadership structure. And this shift may reflect a desire to streamline decision making processes, enhance military effectiveness, and depoliticize the military operational aspect. And by separating political and military function, the PAVN could potentially improve its operational effectiveness and focus more squarely on military objectives without undue political interference. And the reason behind the decision to abolish the dual political and the military command are not provided in the statement. However, such a shift may have been motivated by a variety of factors, including changes in the strategic priorities, lessons learned from the previous conflict, or broader political development within Vietnam. Next, friends, last part we'll discuss about the evolution of military tactics, that is a comparative analysis of PLA and PAVN strategies. First point in this about the background on PLA and PAVN tactics. Friends, during the Korean War, the People Liberation Army initially employed human wave assault, which means a tactic characterized by a large number of troops advancing en masse toward enemy position. However, this tactic proved ineffective against well-trained and well-equipped enemy forces, such as those of United Nations Command. And recognizing the limitation of human wave assault, the PLA underwent a tactical evolution, introducing new tactics that emphasized firepower, surprise, and cover. And instead of relying on massed formation, the PLA began employing smaller attacking groups, which allowed for greater flexibility and maneuverability on the battlefield. And these new tactics aimed to exploit terrain features, achieve tactical surprise, and maximize the effectiveness of infantry firepower. Friends, the PLA experience and lesson learned during the Korean War were later shared with the People Army of Vietnam during the First Indochina War. And this exchange of military knowledge and experience between the PLA and PAVN contributed to the latter development of more effective tactics and strategies in their own conflict against the French colonial forces. And by drawing upon the PLA experience in Korea, the PAVN was able to adapt and refine its approach to warfare, ultimately contributing to its success in achieving victory in the First Indochina War and laying the groundwork for future conflicts, including the Vietnam War. Next point about the PAVN initial use of human wave assault. Friends, in the early stages of Vietnam War, the People Army of Vietnam initially employed tactics reminiscent of human wave assault used by the People Liberation Army during the Korean War. And these mass attacks involved sending a large number of troops in densely packed formation toward enemy position, aiming to overwhelm the enemy through sheer numerical superiority and persistence. However, as the conflict progressed, particularly highlighted by the battles like Dien Bien Phu, what we have discussed earlier in the previous video, the PVN experienced significant casualties and inefficiencies associated with this human wave assault. And the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in particular demonstrated the limitations of flaws of massed frontal assault against well-prepared defensive position. Friends, the French forces effectively repelled the PAVN human wave assault, inflicting heavy casualties and ultimately leading to the defeat of PAVN. And these high casualties and inefficiencies experienced by PAVN during battles like Dien Bien Phu served as a harsh lesson, leading to a realization within the PAVN leadership of the inherent flaws in human wave assault as a tactical approach. And this realization prompted a strategic shift within the PAVN toward more nuanced and sophisticated tactics, emphasizing maneuverability, flexibility, and the exploitations of terrain and cover. Moving next. Next point is about the Soviet influence on PLA and PAVN tactics. Friends, Soviet advisors played an important role in assisting the PLA and PAVN in modernizing their infantry tactics. And drawing from their own experience and tactical doctrine, Soviet advisors provided guidance on how to adopt and adapt and employ more effective methods of warfare. One key aspect of Soviet tactical doctrine that influenced both PLA and PAVN was the emphasis on small scale, coordinated assaults rather than relying on massed attack characterized by large numbers of troops advancing in close formation. Soviet advisors advocated for more strategic and methodical approach to combat, and this involved the use of smaller, well coordinated unit to achieve specific objectives with greater efficiency and effectiveness. Friends, the influence of Soviet advisors led to a departure from the outdated tactic of mass attack, which were often associated with high casualties and limited success. And instead, the PLA and PAVN began to prioritize tactics that emphasize agility, flexibility, and the exploitation of enemy weaknesses through carefully coordinated maneuver and assault. Moving next about the Chinese reversion to mass assault tactics. Friends, under the Lin Biao leadership, the PLA reverted to the mass assault, abandoning the principles of small scale, coordinated assaults advocated by the Soviet military advisors. And this reversion to the mass tactics involved a return to large scale frontal attack, characterized by the concentration of troops in densely packed formation. And the decision to revert to mass assault tactics under the Lin Biao leadership signified a rejection of the lessons learned from the Soviets regarding the modern infantry tactics. And despite the influence of Soviet military advisors in the 1950s, Lin Biao leadership favored a return to more traditional, albeit less effective methods of warfare. And under the Lin Biao leadership, political work took precedence over professional military training within the PLA. And this prioritization of political indoctrination over tactical proficiency led to a gap in the tactical training among PLA personnel. As a result, soldiers may have lacked the necessary skill and preparation to effectively execute modern infantry tactics on the battlefield. Moving next point about Vietnamese adaptation to modern tactics. Friends, Soviet support in the late 1950s played a crucial role in the PAVN modernization effort, focusing on transforming the army into a professional fighting force. And this assistance likely included the provision of advanced weaponry, equipment, and training program designed to enhance the combat effectiveness and operational capability of the PAVN. And during the Second Indochina War, also known as the Vietnam War, the PAVN largely abandoned the use of human wave assault, the tactic that had been employed in the earlier conflicts. Instead, the PAVN adopted phase attack, which involve carefully planned and coordinated offensive, emphasizing speed, surprise, and synchronized action of small units. And this shift in the tactics allowed the PAVN to adapt to the realities of modern warfare and achieve greater success on the battlefield. Next, about the 1979 PLA attack on Vietnam. Friends, despite advancement in the military tactics and the lesson learned from previous conflict, the PLA continued to rely on the human wave assault during the 1979 conflict with the Vietnam. Human wave assault involved sending large number of troops in densely packed formation toward enemy position, often with little regard for casualties. And despite experiencing setbacks and recognizing errors in their approach, the PLA persisted in using mass assault tactics in subsequent attack against the Vietnam. And this suggests a reluctance or inability to adapt to more modern and effective tactics, instead relying on traditional method that had proven to be less successful in contemporary warfare. Moving next point about examples of PLA persistence and use of mass assault. Friends, in Feb 1979, the PLA 55th Army launched an attack on Vietnamese defensive line at Dong Dang. And the PLA employed mass wave assault involving large number of troops advancing in densely packed formation toward the Vietnamese defenses. And despite the use of mass assault tactics, the PLA encountered difficulties in breaching the Vietnamese defense at Dong Dang. And the Vietnamese forces had prepared defensive positions and were able to repel the PLA frontal assault, inflicting heavy casualties on the attacking forces. And despite facing setbacks and difficulties in breaching the Vietnamese defenses, the PLA persisted with the use of mass assault tactics. And this persistence indicates a reliance on traditional method of warfare despite their ineffectiveness in the face of well-prepared and entrenched defenders. Next, about the PLA attack on the Vietnamese position. Friends, in April 1984, the PLA launched an attack on the Vietnamese position located on the Lao Shan and Giang Sha mountain. The PLA employed massed frontal assaults involving large number of troops advancing directly toward the Vietnamese position. And despite the inherent risk and challenges associated with the massed frontal assault, the PLA attack on Lao Shan and Giang Sha mountain were successful. The attacking forces were able to overcome Vietnamese defenses and achieve their military objectives. Friends, the example what we have discussed, it highlights the continued reliance on the mass assault tactics by the PLA during the 1984 conflict with Vietnam. And despite facing criticism and recognizing the limitations of such tactics, the PLA persisted in employing massed frontal assault as a primary method of engagement. Moving next, last we'll discuss about conclusion on a PLA tactical inflexibility. Friends, the historical record suggests that despite facing setbacks and recognizing the limitation of massed assault tactics, the People Liberation Army persisted in their use, resulting in battlefield tragedies and missed opportunities for strategic adaptation. The tactical inflexibility stands in the stark contrast to the adaptive approach adopted by the People Army of Vietnam, which embraced the modern warfare principles and adapted its tactics accordingly. Friends, the PLA insistence on employing mass assault tactics, characterized by a large scale frontal attack and human wave assault, reflect a reluctance or inability to learn from the past mistakes and adapt to the changing battlefield dynamics. And despite historical lessons, including experiences from conflict such as Korean War and the Vietnam War, the PLA continued to rely on outdated methods that proved ineffective against well prepared and entrenched adversaries. And in contrast, the PAVN demonstrated a willingness to evolve and modernize its tactics, transitioning away from human wave assault and adopting more sophisticated approach to warfare, such as phased attack and coordinated maneuver. And this adaptation to the modern warfare principles allowed the PAVN to achieve greater success on the battlefield and effectively counter the PLA advances. Friends, here we come to the end of part 19. Sincere request from you all, please like, subscribe and share among your friends. Stay tuned for the last video on the Edward O. Dowd. Thank you and keep watching.